Glenn Jameson looked every one of his 52 years, his fair hair flecked with silver, his aristocratic face mournful, his 6'2" frame too thin. He hunched at the desk in his study and felt a sense of panic, like the beginnings of a fire flickering at his feet, then billowing to an inferno. How much longer could the firm go on? There wasn't enough money coming in. The appointment book had too many empty spots. Maybe they shouldn't dump Kirk, even though cutting him should save at least $100,000 a year. He hated looking into Kirk's blue eyes, which held the hurt puzzlement of a kicked dog. Of course, Kirk was young, not yet 30. He was a brilliant lawyer. He'd find a job. But he wouldn't find a job on the island. There were only 2 other firms, and neither intended to expand. Not in times like these. Kirk needed to stay on Broward's Rock. Glenn tried not to think how desperately Kirk needed to be here. Glenn wondered if it would do any good to talk to Cleo again. If Kirk stayed, Laura wouldn't be so angry with him either. It was a misery to go to the office and see Kirk, tight-lipped and grim. Then he shook his head. He knew in his heart that Cleo wouldn't agree to keep Kirk. Maybe it had been another mistake to give Kirk a couple of months to wind down his cases, but that had seemed the decent thing to do, and Cleo had agreed. Glenn had been a little surprised at her acquiescence, but grateful he didn't have to face her disapproval. He was getting enough disapproval around town. A couple of times at the men's grill, he was sure he'd been avoided by clients. In fact, Ted Toomey had canceled an appointment a few days after word got out that the firm was letting Kirk go. Ted had said evasively that he was still giving the matter that they had intended to discuss some thought. One more empty slot in the appointment book. The money wasn't coming in, and Cleo wanted many things. He'd given in over the trip to Paris for Christmas. When the kids were little, he and Maddie and the kids came home from the midnight service and put the baby Jesus in the creche. Now the creche was in the attic with the other Christmas decorations that had been in his family for generations. The decorations Maddie and the kids had made together were boxed up, too. Cleo had wanted all new decorations for their first Christmas together. He'd hated the tree. Shiny white with all blue balls. The tree reminded him of a department store. The kids hated the tree, too. They hated everything Cleo did. This year she had waved away the idea of decorating. After all, they'd be in Paris. The kids had been unhappy ever since he married Cleo. He used to be excited to have his children home. Not anymore. Maddie had been gone so long now. He still felt the clutch of emptiness in his gut when he thought of her, and the night the police came to the door to tell him about the accident. The first few years he'd been in a daze, working, trying not to think, hurting. He owed everything to Elaine. She'd given up her job in Atlanta and come to help and be there for the kids. The kids loved their aunt. He felt guilty every time he passed the first bedroom on the second floor that had been Elaine's room. Now she lived in the cottage not far from the gazebo. She'd acted as if the new quarters were fine. Maybe she liked the cottage, but she didn't like Cleo any more than the kids did. Cleo had insisted Elaine needed a life of her own. After all, she'd done a good job with the kids. Maybe she'd like to go back to Atlanta. But Elaine had been on the island for so many years now. She had her friends, a life she'd built, and of course Tommy was still in high school. That was another problem.